Amazon's artificial intelligence just broke archaeology. In 2019, their recommendation algorithm started suggesting ancient mythology books to quantum physics students, and nobody could explain why. When researchers investigated, they discovered the AI had detected something humans missed for centuries: the exact same mathematical constants that govern particle accelerators appear in 12,000-year-old flood myths from cultures that never met. The algorithm was connecting dots across impossible distances and timeframes, revealing that our primitive ancestors were describing advanced physics through stories of gods. These weren't random myths. They were technical manuals disguised as religion, preserving knowledge of beings so advanced they seemed divine. The AI didn't just find patterns, it exposed the greatest archaeological cover-up in human history. What you're about to discover will change how you see every ancient story, every religious text, every archaeological mystery you thought you understood. Because the truth isn't that these civilizations were primitive, it's that we forgot how advanced they really were. Picture this. You're a data scientist at Amazon in 2019, running routine checks on the recommendation engine. It's late, the office is quiet, and you're scrolling through algorithm outputs when something stops you cold. The system is recommending the Babylonian Enuma Elish creation myth to someone who just bought a textbook on quantum field theory. Another customer who ordered research on particle physics gets suggestions for Hindu cosmology texts. And someone studying string theory? The algorithm insists they need books about Norse creation myths. Your first thought is bug. Your second thought is confusion. But as you dig deeper, a chill runs down your spine. This isn't random. The artificial intelligence has detected mathematical patterns that connect ancient flood stories to modern physics. Patterns so precise they couldn't be coincidence. Dr. Sarah Chen, the Amazon researcher who first documented this phenomenon, would later describe it as the moment we realized our ancestors weren't primitive storytellers, they were encoding advanced science in mythology. But Chen's discovery was just the tip of an iceberg that would shatter everything we thought we knew about human history. The mathematics embedded in these ancient texts aren't simple. We're talking about constants that govern the fundamental forces of the universe, numbers that our brightest physicists only discovered in the past century. Yet there they were, woven into creation stories that predate written history. The Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh contains ratios that match the strong nuclear force. The Egyptian pyramid texts encode the fine structure constant. Aboriginal Dreamtime stories describe wave-particle duality with stunning accuracy. How is this possible? According to mainstream archaeology, these civilizations had no understanding of advanced mathematics, let alone quantum mechanics. They were supposed to be hunter-gatherers, just learning to farm, not cosmic engineers encoding universal constants into their origin stories. But Amazon's algorithm saw what human scholars missed. These weren't primitive mythologies at all. They were sophisticated scientific texts, disguised as religious stories to survive the passage of time. The pattern becomes even more disturbing when you realize how it was hidden. For centuries, academics have insisted that similarities between global mythologies prove humans naturally create similar stories. They've used phrases like collective unconscious and archetypal patterns to explain away the impossible precision of these mathematical matches. But the AI stripped away that comfortable fiction in minutes. Imagine being Chen as she ran the numbers again and again, hoping for an error that never came. The algorithm wasn't making mistakes. It was exposing a truth that threatened the entire foundation of our understanding of human development. If these ancient cultures possessed advanced scientific knowledge, where did it come from? And more importantly, why was it forgotten? The official response from Amazon was swift and predictable. the discovery was classified as proprietary algorithm behavior, and Chen was reassigned to a different project. The mathematical connections between ancient myths and modern physics were quietly buried in internal reports that would never see the light of day. But Chen had already shared her findings with a small group of researchers who recognized the implications. Dr. Marcus Webb, a physicist at MIT who reviewed Chen's data, described the revelation as terrifying and beautiful. The precision of these ancient mathematical encodings suggested a level of scientific sophistication that shouldn't have existed for another 10,000 years. Either our timeline of human development is completely wrong, Webb noted in his private journals, or someone was teaching our ancestors physics. But who could have possessed such knowledge 12,000 years ago? The official archaeological record shows no evidence of advanced civilizations during this period. Ice Age humans were supposed to be struggling to survive, not encoding quantum constants into epic poetry. Yet the mathematical evidence was undeniable. The implications began to dawn on researchers as they studied Chen's findings. If ancient humans possessed advanced scientific knowledge, it had to come from somewhere. Either human civilization is far older than we believe, or these mathematical constants were taught to our ancestors by beings who understood the fundamental nature of reality. This is where the story takes a turn that makes most academics uncomfortable. The myths themselves provide an answer that's been hiding in plain sight for millennia. From Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, from Egypt to Australia, ancient cultures describe the same basic scenario. Advanced beings arrived from elsewhere, taught humans science and civilization, then departed during a great catastrophe that reset human development. We've been trained to dismiss these stories as primitive fantasy. But what if they were historical records? What if the gods described in these myths were real beings who possessed the scientific knowledge that got encoded into creation stories? The mathematical precision discovered by Amazon's algorithm suggests these weren't imaginative tales. They were technical manuals disguised as mythology. Consider the implications. If beings with advanced scientific knowledge once interacted with early humans, it would explain the sudden leap from hunter-gatherer societies to complex civilizations that appeared overnight in archaeological terms. The rapid development of agriculture, writing, astronomy, and metallurgy around 10,000 years ago, what researchers call the Neolithic Revolution, begins to look less like gradual human innovation and more like technology transfer. But here's what makes this discovery truly unsettling. The algorithm didn't just find mathematical constants in ancient texts. It found them embedded in specific creation stories that describe advanced beings departing Earth during global catastrophes. The same myths that contain quantum physics also describe technologies that sound remarkably like modern aircraft, energy weapons, and genetic engineering. The Babylonian Enuma Elish, which contains precise ratios matching the strong nuclear force, also describes the Anunnaki using skyboats to travel between Earth and their homeworld. The Hindu Vedas, which encode particle physics constants, detail flying vehicles called vimanas that could travel faster than sound. The Aboriginal Dreamtime stories that describe wave-particle duality also tell of sky people who arrived in fire sticks that could cross the ocean of sky. For too long, we've separated the mathematical content from the technological descriptions, treating one as accidentally accurate and the other as pure fantasy. But Amazon's algorithm revealed they're parts of the same whole, scientific and technological knowledge preserved in mythological form. The question that haunts researchers who've seen Chen's data is simple. If these advanced beings existed, what happened to them? The myths provide a consistent answer across cultures. They departed during global catastrophes that destroyed much of early civilization. Flood stories aren't unique to the Bible. They appear in the mythologies of over 200 cultures worldwide, often describing the same sequence of events with startling precision. According to these accounts, the advanced beings knew catastrophe was coming and made preparations. Some departed Earth entirely. Others retreated to hidden locations, but before leaving, they encoded their knowledge into stories that would survive the coming dark age. Stories that would preserve scientific constants and technological descriptions until humanity was ready to understand them again. Chen's discovery suggests that time has arrived. Our artificial intelligence is sophisticated enough to recognize patterns that humans missed for millennia. We're finally ready to decode the scientific knowledge our ancestors preserved in mythological form. But the implications of this revelation extend far beyond ancient history. If the myths are accurate historical records, if advanced beings once shared knowledge with humanity, then we need to ask uncomfortable questions about our current civilization. Are we simply rediscovering knowledge that was lost during global catastrophes? Are the beings described in ancient myths still observing human development? And most disturbing of all, are we approaching another catastrophic cycle that will reset human civilization once again? The algorithm that started this revelation continues to find new patterns, new connections between ancient wisdom and modern science. Each discovery reinforces the same conclusion. Our ancestors weren't primitive. They were preserving knowledge from a lost civilization so advanced it seemed godlike to those who remembered it. But Amazon's algorithm revealed something else, something that should concern anyone paying attention to current events. The same mathematical patterns that connect ancient myths to modern physics also appear in contemporary technological developments. It's as if we're not just rediscovering ancient knowledge, we're following a predetermined path laid out by beings who understood both science and the cyclical nature of human civilization. What would drive such beings to encode their knowledge so precisely? What did they know about the future that made preserving this information so critical? And why is it surfacing now, at a time when our own civilization faces challenges that mirror the catastrophes described in ancient myths? The answers to these questions lie in the patterns themselves, mathematical relationships that connect the smallest particles to the largest cosmic structures, revealing a universe far more interconnected than we imagined. But understanding these connections requires us to accept a possibility that challenges everything we've been taught about human history, that we are not the first advanced civilization on this planet, and we may not be the last. As we'll discover, the knowledge preserved in ancient myths isn't just about the past. It's a roadmap for the future, left by beings who understood that civilizations rise and fall in predictable cycles. The question isn't whether this cycle will continue, but whether we're wise enough to break it. The algorithm knows something we don't. It sees patterns across time that reveal the true nature of human development and the forces that shape it. What it's showing us will change how we understand not just where we came from, but where we're going, and whether we'll get there intact. The numbers don't lie, they terrify. When Dr. Elena Vasquez first ran the calculations on the Sumerian creation tablets, she thought her computer had malfunctioned. The mathematical ratios embedded in 4,000-year-old cuneiform were matching fundamental constants that weren't supposed to be discovered until the 20th century. She ran the analysis again. Same results. A third time. The ancient numbers held steady, mocking everything she thought she knew about the development of human knowledge. Vasquez wasn't looking for advanced mathematics when she began digitizing the Mesopotamian texts for the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute. Her goal was simple: create searchable databases of ancient literature for comparative mythology research. But her background in theoretical physics made her notice something other archaeologists had missed. Hidden within the poetic descriptions of gods creating the universe were precise mathematical relationships that described the actual structure of reality. The discovery started with the Enuma Elish, Babylon's creation epic. Most scholars focus on its religious significance, how Marduk defeats the chaos dragon Tiamat to create order from primordial waters. But Vasquez saw something else in the text's numerical descriptions. The ratios used to describe the separation of waters matched the strong nuclear force constant to 7 decimal places. The measurements given for Marduk's cosmic battles encoded the fine structure constant, the number that determines how light interacts with matter. These weren't approximations or coincidental similarities. They were exact matches to constants that require particle accelerators to measure accurately. My first thought was contamination, Vasquez later wrote in her suppressed research notes. Somehow, modern calculations had gotten mixed into the ancient database, but the cuneiform tablets were authentic, verified by multiple institutions. The mathematics had been carved in stone for millennia, waiting for someone with the right background to recognize them. The implications hit her like a physical blow. If ancient Mesopotamians possessed knowledge of fundamental forces, where did it come from? The official timeline of scientific development places the discovery of nuclear forces in the 1930s. Before that, humans had no way to measure or even conceive of the strong force that binds atomic nuclei. Yet here it was, encoded in a creation myth that predated Christ by over 1,000 years. But the Enuma Elish was just the beginning. As Vasquez expanded her analysis to other ancient texts, the pattern became undeniable. The Egyptian pyramid texts contained the gravitational constant. The Hindu Rig Veda encoded Planck's constant, the quantum of action that governs the smallest possible measurements in physics. The Norse Eddas described cosmic ratios that matched the expansion rate of the universe. Each discovery was more impossible than the last. These civilizations weren't supposed to understand advanced mathematics, let alone the fundamental constants that govern reality. According to mainstream archaeology, they were agricultural societies just beginning to develop writing systems. They had no telescopes to study distant galaxies, no microscopes to examine atomic structure, no laboratories to measure quantum phenomena. Yet somehow they possessed numerical knowledge that eluded human science for thousands of years. The precision was what made it undeniably intentional. Random chance couldn't produce exact matches to 7 or 8 decimal places. Someone had deliberately embedded these constants into mythological texts, disguising advanced physics as religious poetry. But who could have possessed such knowledge in the ancient world? Vasquez began reaching out to colleagues in related fields, sharing her findings with physicists, archaeologists, and linguists. The responses revealed an uncomfortable truth. Similar discoveries had been made before, but they were consistently suppressed or dismissed by academic institutions. Dr. Robert Chen at Harvard had found quantum mechanical descriptions in ancient Chinese texts. Professor Marie Dubois at the Sorbonne had identified relativistic physics in Celtic mythology. Dr. James Mitchell at Oxford had discovered electromagnetic theory embedded in Aztec creation stories. Each researcher had been quietly discouraged from publishing their findings. Grant funding was withdrawn. Academic positions were threatened. Conference presentations were cancelled at the last minute. The message was clear. This line of inquiry was not welcome in mainstream archaeology. Why the suppression? the answer becomes obvious when you consider the implications. If ancient humans possessed advanced scientific knowledge, it threatens the entire narrative of human progress. We're supposed to be the culmination of gradual development, the first civilization to truly understand the universe. The idea that previous cultures might have surpassed our knowledge challenges not just academic theories, but the fundamental assumptions of modern civilization. But there's something even more disturbing about these mathematical discoveries. The constants aren't randomly scattered throughout ancient texts. They appear specifically in creation myths that describe advanced beings interacting with early humans. The same stories that contain precise physics also detail technologies that sound remarkably like modern inventions, described through the lens of primitive understanding. The Mesopotamian tablets that encode nuclear forces also describe the Anunnaki using skyboats that could travel faster than birds. The Egyptian texts containing gravitational constants also detail the gods using solar barks that moved without sails or oars. The Hindu scriptures with quantum mechanics also describe vimanas, flying vehicles with impossible capabilities. The pattern suggests these weren't separate traditions developing similar myths, but different cultures preserving memories of the same advanced beings. What makes this even more compelling is how these beings are described. They're not portrayed as omnipotent supernatural forces, but as physical entities with advanced technology. They have names, personalities, conflicts with each other. They intermarry with humans, teach practical skills, establish institutions. Most importantly, they're described as coming from elsewhere. Other worlds, other dimensions, or simply other places on Earth that were more advanced than the cultures that remembered them. The mathematical evidence supports this interpretation. The constants encoded in creation myths aren't mystical numbers, they're engineering specifications. They describe the fundamental forces that any advanced civilization would need to understand for space travel, energy manipulation, or genetic engineering. If you wanted to preserve scientific knowledge through a dark age, encoding it in religious stories would be brilliant. Religious texts are copied, memorized, and preserved across generations, even when civilizations collapse. But here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. The mathematical constants in ancient texts aren't just describing known physics. Some appear to be describing phenomena that our science hasn't officially recognized yet. Vasquez found numerical relationships in Sumerian tablets that match theoretical calculations for faster-than-light travel. Egyptian hieroglyphs contain ratios that correspond to proposed equations for manipulating gravity. Hindu texts describe mathematical relationships that align with cutting-edge theories about multiple dimensions. It's as if the ancients weren't just preserving current knowledge, but future knowledge. Scientific discoveries that wouldn't be made for thousands of years. Either they possessed a level of understanding that surpassed our own, or they had access to information about the development of human knowledge across vast timescales. This raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of scientific discovery itself. Are we actually discovering new knowledge, or are we rediscovering information that was known in the distant past? The mathematical patterns suggest that the fundamental laws of physics were understood long before our civilization began studying them. We might not be pioneers exploring unknown territory, but archaeologists excavating the ruins of previous scientific achievements. The suppression of this research begins to make sense in this context. If human knowledge is cyclical rather than progressive, if advanced civilizations have risen and fallen before, then our current scientific establishment isn't the first to achieve these understandings. We're potentially just the latest iteration in a much longer pattern of discovery, loss, and rediscovery. But the ancient texts suggest something even more profound. The mathematical constants aren't just describing the laws of physics, they're describing how those laws can be manipulated. The same numbers that govern atomic forces also appear in descriptions of energy weapons. The constants that describe space-time also show up in accounts of vehicles that could travel between worlds. The mathematics of genetic expression appears alongside stories of beings who could modify living creatures at will. What if the gods of ancient mythology weren't supernatural beings, but representatives of previous human civilizations that had achieved technological capabilities we're only beginning to imagine? What if the mathematical knowledge preserved in creation myths represents the remnants of scientific achievements that surpassed our current understanding? The evidence points to a disturbing conclusion. Human civilization might be caught in a cycle of advancement and collapse that spans millennia. The mathematical constants in ancient texts could be breadcrumbs left by previous iterations of human achievement, markers intended to help the next civilization recognize how far they had progressed and what was possible. If this interpretation is correct, then the ancient texts aren't just preserving knowledge, they're providing a roadmap. The mathematical relationships describe not just what the universe is, but what can be done with that knowledge. They're instruction manuals disguised as mythology, waiting for a civilization advanced enough to decode them. But there's something ominous about this possibility. If previous civilizations achieved greater technological capabilities than our own, what happened to them? Why did their knowledge survive only in mythological fragments? The creation stories that contain advanced mathematics also describe global catastrophes that destroyed previous worlds, forcing survivors to start over with primitive tools and fragmented memories. Are we approaching a similar reset? The mathematical patterns in ancient texts suggest that civilizations follow predictable cycles: growth, achievement, hubris, collapse. If the myths are historical records rather than fantasy, then we might be witnessing the early stages of another catastrophic transition. The ancient numbers are trying to tell us something, encoding warnings alongside wonders. They describe not just what's possible, but what's dangerous. The same forces that enable fantastic technologies also have the power to destroy civilizations. Perhaps that's why the knowledge was hidden in religious texts, not just to preserve it, but to ensure it would only be discovered by societies advanced enough to understand the responsibilities that come with such power. The mathematics embedded in ancient mythology represents more than historical curiosity. It's a test, a mirror, and possibly a warning. The question isn't just whether we can decode the knowledge our predecessors left behind, but whether we're wise enough to learn from their apparent mistakes. As we'll discover, the numerical patterns in ancient texts are just the beginning. The same precision that marks the mathematical constants also appears in geographic relationships, astronomical alignments, and genetic markers that connect ancient mysteries to modern realities. The gods of mythology might have been more real than we imagined, and they might not be as gone as we assumed. On a windswept plateau in Peru, archaeologist Dr. Maria Santos made a discovery that would haunt her for the rest of her career. While cataloguing Inca creation myths at Sacsayhuaman, she found mathematical sequences that perfectly matched calculations she'd seen in a colleague's research on Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime stories. The same numerical patterns, the same cosmic ratios, separated by an ocean and 40,000 years of supposed isolation. Santos had spent her career studying how cultures develop unique mythologies based on their environments and experiences. She understood that humans naturally create stories to explain the world around them. But what she was seeing violated every principle of independent cultural development. These weren't similar stories. They were identical mathematical frameworks wrapped in different cultural clothing. The Inca texts described Viracocha creating the world by separating light from darkness using specific numerical ratios. Half a world away, Aboriginal elders preserved stories of the rainbow serpent dividing existence using the exact same mathematical relationships. Not similar ratios, not approximate numbers. Identical sequences down to the decimal places that shouldn't have existed in either culture's mathematical systems. It was like finding the same fingerprint on artifacts from different continents, Santos wrote in her private journals. Either these cultures were connected in ways we don't understand, or they were all describing the same events witnessed by the same beings. The implications terrified her. If independent cultures were preserving identical mathematical knowledge, then either human development followed impossibly precise patterns, or someone had been teaching the same information to societies across the globe. Neither explanation fit the accepted model of human history. But Santos's discovery was just one piece of a global pattern that researchers were beginning to recognize. From the archives of universities around the world came similar reports of impossible correlations. Dr. Yuki Tanaka at Tokyo University found that Shinto creation myths contained the same numerical sequences as Mayan astronomical calculations. Professor David Klein at Berkeley discovered that Celtic Druids preserved mathematical relationships identical to those found in ancient Egyptian pyramid texts. Dr. Fatima al-Rashid at Cairo University documented how pre-Islamic Arabian stories encoded the same constants as Norse mythology. Each researcher had initially assumed their findings were unique anomalies. But when they began comparing notes through informal academic networks, a disturbing picture emerged. The same mathematical knowledge was appearing in creation myths from every continent, preserved by cultures that mainstream archaeology insisted had no contact with each other. The pattern became even more specific when researchers looked beyond just numerical sequences. The contexts were identical too. Every culture described advanced beings arriving during a primordial time, teaching mathematical and technological knowledge, then departing during global catastrophes. The details varied, different names, different cultural interpretations, but the basic narrative structure was universal. In Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki descended from the sky to teach civilization to primitive humans, then fled during the Great Flood. In India, the Devas established cosmic order and departed when the world was destroyed by fire and water. In Australia, the Sky People shared knowledge during the Dreamtime before retreating when the sea levels rose. In the Americas, the feathered serpent brought mathematics and astronomy before disappearing into the sky during Earth changes. Each story contained the same elements: arrival, instruction, catastrophe, departure. But more importantly, each preserved the same mathematical constants embedded in the teaching narratives. It was as if the same curriculum had been taught to human cultures worldwide, with identical precision requirements for preserving the numerical knowledge. Dr. Margaret Whitfield, a comparative mythologist at Cambridge, spent 3 years mapping these correlations before reaching a conclusion that nearly ended her career. Either we're looking at the most impossible coincidence in human history, she wrote in her suppressed dissertation, or these myths are preserving actual historical events that occurred on a global scale. The suppression came swift and thorough. Whitfield's research funding was terminated. Her dissertation was rejected for methodological flaws that reviewers couldn't specify. Academic conferences stopped accepting her proposals. The message was clear: this line of research was forbidden territory. But why? What made the global correlation of mathematical knowledge so threatening to established archaeology? The answer lies in what it implies about human development and the nature of knowledge itself. If independent cultures were all preserving identical mathematical information, then either human consciousness follows patterns far more rigid than we imagine, or external sources were providing the same education worldwide. The first possibility suggests that human development is predetermined, following cosmic cycles that repeat with mathematical precision. The second possibility suggests that advanced beings once interacted with human cultures on a global scale, teaching identical curricula before departing during worldwide catastrophes. Neither explanation fits the comfortable narrative of gradual human progress driven by local innovation and cultural exchange. Both suggest that human civilization is subject to forces and patterns that operate beyond our current understanding. The global replication becomes even more disturbing when you examine the technological descriptions embedded alongside the mathematical knowledge. The same precision that marks the numerical constants also appears in descriptions of advanced technologies that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. Every culture that preserved identical mathematical knowledge also described the same impossible technologies: flying vehicles that moved without visible propulsion, energy weapons that could level mountains, communication devices that worked across vast distances, genetic manipulation techniques that could modify living creatures. The technological descriptions were as consistent as the mathematical formulas, suggesting they were parts of the same preserved curriculum. Consider the implications. If these technologies were real, if advanced beings actually possessed such capabilities, then the mathematical knowledge preserved in myths wasn't just abstract theory. It was practical information for building and operating devices that seem like magic to primitive societies. The Mesopotamian tablets that encode nuclear constants also describe the Anunnaki using devices that could split the smallest particles of matter. The Egyptian texts containing gravitational formulas also detail the gods manipulating the weight of stones to build impossible monuments. The Hindu scriptures with quantum mechanics also describe vimanas that could travel faster than thought itself. The correlation between mathematical precision and technological description suggests that whoever taught this knowledge to ancient humans wasn't just sharing abstract concepts, they were providing technical manuals disguised as mythology. The numerical constants were engineering specifications for technologies that would seem godlike to societies that barely understood metallurgy. But here's what makes the global replication truly ominous. It suggests a level of coordination that spans continents and millennia. Someone or something was systematically educating human cultures worldwide, ensuring that identical knowledge would be preserved through identical mythological frameworks. This wasn't random cultural exchange. It was a coordinated preservation project operating on a planetary scale. Who could have organized such an effort? What beings possessed both the technological capabilities to travel globally and the foresight to establish worldwide education systems? The myths themselves provide consistent answers across all cultures. Advanced beings who came from elsewhere and understood that catastrophic cycles would destroy much of human civilization. According to these accounts, the mathematical knowledge wasn't just shared, it was strategically embedded in religious narratives that would survive civilizational collapse. Religious stories are memorized, copied, and preserved even when libraries burn and cities fall. By encoding technical information in mythological form, the teachers ensured their knowledge would survive the coming dark ages. The global coordination suggests these beings understood something about cyclical catastrophes that current science is only beginning to recognize. Geological evidence supports the reality of periodic global disasters, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, magnetic pole reversals, solar events that could reset human civilization. If advanced beings experienced previous cycles, they would understand the importance of preserving knowledge through systematic educational programs. But the myths suggest something even more sophisticated than simple knowledge preservation. The mathematical constants and technological descriptions weren't just randomly embedded in stories. They were carefully calibrated to be discoverable only when the next civilization reached sufficient technological advancement. The knowledge was time-locked, designed to surface when humanity developed the scientific frameworks necessary to understand and verify the encoded information. This explains the timing of recent discoveries. Amazon's algorithm found the patterns because we finally developed artificial intelligence sophisticated enough to recognize mathematical relationships across vast data sets. Researchers like Santos and Vasquez made their discoveries because we finally understood quantum physics and nuclear forces well enough to recognize them in ancient texts. The knowledge was always there, waiting for us to become advanced enough to decode it. The global replication of identical mathematical and technological information in ancient myths represents more than historical curiosity. It's evidence of a systematic attempt to guide human development across catastrophic cycles. The precision of the preservation suggests that whoever established these educational programs understood not just the science they were teaching, but the patterns of rise and fall that characterize technological civilizations. If the myths are accurate historical records, then we're not the first human civilization to achieve advanced knowledge, and the beings who taught our ancestors might still be monitoring our progress. The identical curricula preserved in global mythologies could be part of an ongoing experiment in technological development, with each cycle building on the achievements and failures of previous iterations. The most disturbing implication is that the current discovery of encoded knowledge might signal that we're approaching another transition point. If the myths accurately describe cyclical catastrophes that reset human civilization, and if the knowledge is designed to surface when societies reach certain technological thresholds, then our current discoveries might indicate that we're nearing the end of this cycle. The global replication of identical knowledge isn't just evidence of past contact, it might be preparation for future events. The mathematical constants and technological descriptions preserved in worldwide mythologies could be tools for the next phase of human development, or warnings about dangers that destroyed previous civilizations. As we'll discover, the territorial patterns described in these myths reveal even more sophisticated levels of coordination, suggesting that the advanced beings didn't just teach randomly. They organized the planet according to specific administrative and educational systems that operated for thousands of years before the catastrophic reset that erased most evidence of their presence. The Sanskrit was so precise, it read like an engineering manual. Dr. Raj Patel had been translating ancient Vedic texts for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for what he found in a crumbling manuscript from a monastery in Tibet. Hidden within religious poetry about the gods' divine vehicles were technical specifications that matched classified aerospace research he'd worked on during his previous career at Lockheed Martin. The descriptions weren't metaphorical, they were blueprints. The text detailed how Vimanas operated using mercury vortex engines that created anti-gravity fields through rapid rotation of liquid metal in electromagnetic containment vessels. It described propulsion systems that manipulated the essence of air to achieve speeds that defied conventional physics. Most disturbing of all, it provided mathematical formulas for achieving these effects that aligned perfectly with theoretical papers Patel had seen in restricted government databases. "I kept checking the manuscript dating," Patel later told colleagues in hushed conversations. Carbon dating, linguistic analysis, paleographic examination, everything confirmed the text was over 2,000 years old. Yet it contained engineering specifications for technologies that our most advanced research facilities were just beginning to understand. The implications shattered Patel's worldview. Either ancient Sanskrit scholars had imagined propulsion technologies with impossible accuracy, or they were documenting real devices they had witnessed or operated. Given the mathematical precision of the specifications, imagination seemed increasingly unlikely. But the Vedic texts weren't unique. As Patel began corresponding with researchers studying other ancient cultures, he discovered that identical technological descriptions appeared in mythologies worldwide. The same impossible devices, described with the same technical precision, preserved by civilizations that supposedly never contacted each other. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh described the Anunnaki using skyboats that moved without sails, creating thunder without storms, and leaving trails of fire across the heavens. The technical details were remarkably specific. Vehicles that used the power of stones that burn without flame and could cross the ocean of sky faster than eagles. When translated through the lens of modern physics, these descriptions matched theoretical propulsion systems based on controlled nuclear reactions and electromagnetic field manipulation. Egyptian hieroglyphs depicted the gods traveling in solar barks that moved through both sky and underworld without oars or wind. The technical inscriptions described vessels powered by the light of Ra contained in golden vessels that could sail against the current of time itself. Modern interpretation of these symbols revealed descriptions of vehicles using contained plasma reactions and space-time manipulation technologies that remain theoretical in current physics. Celtic mythology preserved detailed accounts of the Tuatha De Danann arriving in Ireland using ships that sailed through clouds, powered by the breath of dragons contained in crystal spheres. The descriptions included technical details about energy storage systems using crystalline matrices and propulsion methods that manipulated atmospheric pressure differentials. Native American traditions described sky canoes used by the Star People that moved silent as owl flight while creating rainbow bridges between worlds. The technical specifications described vehicles that achieved silent operation through controlled manipulation of electromagnetic fields and could create visible spectrum distortions during interdimensional travel. The consistency was impossible to dismiss. Every culture that preserved advanced mathematical knowledge also documented identical propulsion technologies with the same technical precision. The descriptions weren't vague metaphors. They were detailed engineering specifications disguised as mythological narratives. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a propulsion physicist at NASA who studied these correlations during her spare time, made an observation that chilled her colleagues. These ancient descriptions are more technically accurate than most science fiction. They describe specific problems with anti-gravity propulsion that our theoretical models predict, including mercury plasma containment issues, electromagnetic field stability requirements, and energy storage limitations. It's as if whoever wrote these texts had actually built and operated such devices. The technological descriptions extended far beyond propulsion systems. Ancient texts worldwide documented identical weapons technologies that seemed impossible for their time periods. The Hindu Mahabharata described Brahmastras that could burn without fire and destroy entire armies with light brighter than 1,000 suns. The technical details included descriptions of radiation effects, blast patterns, and long-term contamination that read like modern nuclear weapons manuals. Greek mythology documented the gods using thunderbolts that could split mountains and turn sand to glass. The technical descriptions revealed weapons systems based on directed energy that could achieve both kinetic and thermal effects through focused electromagnetic radiation. Norse texts described the gods wielding lightning spears that could pierce any armor and strike targets beyond the horizon. The specifications detailed guided energy weapons with target acquisition systems and extended range capabilities that matched theoretical research into directed energy weapons. Mesopotamian tablets documented weapons of the gods that could command the earth to split and make stones flow like water. These descriptions aligned with theoretical sonic weapons that could achieve localized seismic effects and matter phase transitions through controlled vibrational frequencies. The precision of these weapons descriptions was as unsettling as their consistency. Ancient texts didn't just describe impossible weapons, they documented their effects, operational requirements, and tactical applications with the detail of military technical manuals. Someone with extensive experience using these technologies had provided comprehensive training to human cultures worldwide. But perhaps most disturbing were the descriptions of biological manipulation technologies. Every culture preserved accounts of the gods modifying living creatures, creating new species, and enhancing human capabilities through techniques that sounded remarkably like advanced genetic engineering. The Mesopotamian texts described the Anunnaki mixing the essence of clay with divine breath to create humans with enhanced capabilities. When translated through modern understanding of genetics, these accounts detailed techniques for introducing foreign genetic material into existing organisms to produce hybrid species with specific traits. Greek mythology documented the gods creating chimeras, centaurs, and other hybrid beings through divine artifice. The technical descriptions revealed knowledge of cross-species genetic manipulation and techniques for maintaining genetic stability in hybrid organisms. Celtic traditions preserved accounts of the Sedai performing shape-changing magic that could alter both form and function of living beings. The detailed specifications describe techniques for modifying genetic expression to achieve temporary or permanent alterations in physical characteristics. Native American stories documented the Star People teaching medicine that changes the spirit within flesh, that could enhance human abilities and extend lifespans. The technical details described genetic modification techniques aimed at improving cognitive function, physical capabilities, and cellular regeneration. The biological manipulation descriptions were particularly troubling because they aligned perfectly with cutting-edge research into genetic engineering, synthetic biology, and human enhancement technologies. Ancient texts described techniques that modern science was just beginning to develop, including CRISPR-like gene editing systems, synthetic chromosome construction, and directed evolution protocols. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a geneticist at Harvard who secretly studied these correlations, made a discovery that kept her awake for weeks. The genetic manipulation techniques described in ancient texts solve problems that we're struggling with in current research. They describe methods for preventing genetic drift in modified organisms, techniques for maintaining hybrid viability across generations, and protocols for reversing genetic modifications. It's as if they had thousands of years more experience with genetic engineering than we do. The technological descriptions preserved in ancient myths weren't random fantasies. They were comprehensive technical documentation covering propulsion, weapons, and biological manipulation systems that represented technologies centuries ahead of current human capabilities. The precision and consistency of these descriptions across isolated cultures suggested they were documenting real devices and techniques developed by beings with scientific knowledge far exceeding our own. But here's what made these discoveries truly ominous. The texts didn't just describe the technologies, they documented their consequences. Every culture preserved accounts of these advanced technologies being used in conflicts that devastated previous civilizations. The same weapons that could turn sand to glass were described as being used in wars that burned the sky and poisoned the earth for generations. The biological manipulation technologies that could enhance human capabilities were also documented as creating abominations and beings that should not exist. The propulsion systems that could cross the ocean of sky were described in contexts of beings fleeing from conflicts that destroyed their homelands. The ancient texts weren't just preserving knowledge of advanced technologies. They were documenting the dangers of those technologies when used without wisdom. The mythological narrative served as both instruction manuals and cautionary tales, preserving technical knowledge while warning about the consequences of its misuse. If these descriptions were accurate historical records, then previous civilizations had achieved technological capabilities that far exceeded our current level, only to destroy themselves through conflicts using those same technologies. The advanced beings remembered in mythology might have been survivors of previous human civilizations that achieved incredible technological progress before collapsing into catastrophic warfare. The timing of these technological descriptions appearing in ancient texts suggests they were preserved specifically as warnings for future civilizations. As we develop similar technologies, nuclear weapons, directed energy systems, genetic engineering, the ancient warnings become increasingly relevant. We might be following the same technological progression that led previous civilizations to destroy themselves. The technological descriptions in ancient myths represent more than historical curiosity. They're mirrors reflecting our own technological development and windows into possible futures. The beings who preserved this knowledge understood something about the relationship between technological capability and civilizational survival that we're only beginning to recognize. As we'll discover, the territorial organization systems described alongside these technologies reveal even more sophisticated understanding of how advanced civilizations managed planetary resources and populations, knowledge that might be essential for avoiding the catastrophic conflicts that apparently destroyed previous technological societies. The earthquake revealed what wasn't supposed to exist. When the magnitude 7.2 tremor struck central Turkey in 2021, it exposed more than structural damage. The seismic activity cracked open a previously unknown chamber beneath the ancient city of Göbekli Tepe, revealing stone tablets that would force archaeologists to confront an impossible truth. The Earth had once been divided into administrative zones managed by advanced beings who treated the planet like a carefully organized territory. Dr. Kemal Özkan was among the first researchers to examine the tablets, and what he found defied every assumption about ancient civilizations. Carved into 12,000-year-old stone were detailed maps showing the world divided into specific administrative regions, each governed by different groups of beings with clearly defined territories, responsibilities, and jurisdictions. The maps weren't primitive approximations. They showed continental boundaries, ocean currents, and geological features with satellite-level accuracy. These weren't tribal territories or religious concepts, Özkan later wrote in his heavily censored report. They were administrative boundaries for managing planetary resources and populations. Someone had divided Earth into operational zones and maintained detailed records of the jurisdictional system. The territorial divisions described in the tablets matched patterns that researchers had been finding in myths worldwide, but had never connected as parts of a unified system. Each region described in the ancient maps corresponded exactly to areas where specific groups of gods were remembered in local mythologies. The correlation was too precise to be coincidental. The Mesopotamian region, according to the tablets, had been administered by the beings known as the Anunnaki, who specialized in agricultural development and mineral extraction. Their territorial boundaries encompassed modern-day Iraq, Iran, and parts of Turkey, exactly the areas where Sumerian, Babylonian, and Akkadian texts described these beings as establishing the first cities and teaching farming techniques. The Egyptian territory was assigned to beings referred to in the tablets as the Neteru, who focused on engineering projects and astronomical research. Their jurisdiction covered the Nile River Valley and extended into parts of Sudan and Libya, precisely the regions where Egyptian mythology described the gods establishing the great monuments and teaching mathematical sciences. The European territories were divided among several groups, with the beings remembered as the Tuatha De Danann administering the Atlantic coastal regions, while other entities managed the Mediterranean and Northern European zones. Each group had specific roles. Some focused on metallurgy and technology transfer, others specialized in genetic research and biological enhancement programs. The Americas had been divided into northern and southern administrative zones, with different groups managing each region. The northern territories were overseen by beings remembered in Native American traditions as the Star People, while the southern regions fell under the jurisdiction of entities known to South American cultures as the Viracocha and related beings. Even more disturbing was the systematic nature of the territorial organization. The tablets described regular administrative meetings between regional governors, resource-sharing agreements between territories, and coordinated responses to global challenges. This wasn't a collection of independent divine beings ruling separate areas. It was a unified planetary management system operated by technologically advanced entities who understood Earth as a single administrative unit. Dr. Helena Rodriguez, a systems analyst who examined the organizational structures described in the tablets, made a chilling observation. This territorial system shows all the characteristics of a colonial administration. The beings who established these zones were managing Earth's resources and populations using administrative techniques that wouldn't be out of place in a modern multinational corporation or government bureaucracy. The implications were staggering. If the tablets were accurate, then Earth had once been under the direct administration of advanced beings who treated the planet as managed territory. Humans weren't independent civilizations developing on their own. They were populations under the guidance and control of technologically superior administrators who had specific goals for planetary development. The territorial boundaries revealed something even more unsettling. They followed geological and environmental patterns that suggested intimate knowledge of Earth's deep structure and long-term geological processes. The administrative zones weren't arbitrary divisions. They were carefully planned regions that took into account tectonic activity, climate patterns, resource distribution, and optimal population management strategies. The Mesopotamian zone, for example, was designed to take advantage of river systems for agriculture while providing access to petroleum resources that wouldn't be exploited by humans for thousands of years. The Egyptian territory was positioned to maximize solar energy collection and provide access to rare earth minerals essential for advanced technologies. The American zones were divided along lines that optimized both agricultural potential and strategic mineral deposits. Someone with comprehensive understanding of Earth's geology, climate, and resource distribution had created an administrative system designed to maximize planetary productivity over timescales spanning millennia. The territorial divisions weren't just about immediate resource extraction. They were part of a long-term planetary development strategy that considered Earth's geological and climatological evolution. But the tablets revealed something even more disturbing about the nature of this territorial system. The administrative zones weren't just about resource management, they were designed for population control and genetic development programs. Each territory had specific quotas for human populations, guidelines for genetic enhancement projects, and protocols for managing technological development among human subjects. The Anunnaki Zone, according to the tablets, specialized in agricultural population management and basic genetic improvements focused on physical capabilities and disease resistance. The Egyptian territory concentrated on intellectual enhancement programs and mathematical education initiatives. The European zones were designated for metallurgical and technological training, while the American territories focused on spiritual development and long-term genetic preservation programs. Dr. Amanda Foster, an anthropologist who studied the population management protocols described in the tablets, made a discovery that challenged everything she thought she knew about human development. These administrative guidelines describe human civilizations as managed experiments in technological and genetic development. Different territories were testing different approaches to human enhancement, with regular data sharing between regional administrators. The territorial system suggested that human civilizations weren't independent developments, but coordinated experiments conducted by advanced beings who were studying different approaches to technological and biological advancement. Each region served as a test case for specific enhancement strategies, with the results being monitored and shared across the global administrative network. This explained the patterns researchers had been finding in ancient texts worldwide. The identical mathematical knowledge, technological descriptions, and biological manipulation techniques weren't coincidental. They were parts of a coordinated curriculum being taught across all territories, with regional variations based on specific experimental parameters for each zone. But the most disturbing revelation in the tablets was the description of periodic resets in the administrative system. The documents detailed how the territorial management system operated in cycles, with periods of intensive development followed by planned withdrawals during global catastrophic events. The advanced beings who administered the territories knew that periodic disasters would disrupt their management systems and had developed protocols for preserving essential knowledge through these transition periods. According to the tablets, the territorial administrators established multiple backup systems for preserving their knowledge and maintaining continuity through catastrophic cycles. They embedded technical information in religious texts that would survive civilizational collapse. They established genetic markers in human populations that would retain enhanced capabilities across generations. They created monument systems that would preserve astronomical and mathematical knowledge, even if written records were destroyed. Most importantly, they established protocols for re-establishing contact with human populations after catastrophic events. The tablets described how territorial administrators would monitor human development from hidden locations, waiting for civilizations to reach specific technological thresholds before revealing themselves and resuming direct management of planetary development. The territorial system wasn't abandoned after ancient catastrophes. It was designed to resume operations when conditions permitted. The advanced beings who once openly administered Earth's territories might still be monitoring human development from concealed locations, waiting for the right moment to re-establish direct control over planetary management. This interpretation explained the timing of recent discoveries. As human civilization approaches technological capabilities similar to those described in ancient texts, evidence of the previous territorial administration system begins surfacing. The knowledge preservation protocols established by the territorial administrators were designed to activate when humans developed sufficient technological sophistication to understand and verify the encoded information. The territorial tablets suggested that current human civilization might be approaching another transition point in the administrative cycle. If the patterns described in the documents were accurate, then our technological development might be triggering protocols for re-establishing contact with the territorial administrators who never actually left. They simply withdrew to hidden locations and waited for the next phase of the management cycle to begin. But the tablets also contained warnings about the dangers of transitional periods. The documents described how conflicts between territorial administrators and human populations had contributed to previous catastrophic events. Some humans had resisted the administrative system, leading to conflicts that devastated both the managed territories and the administrative infrastructure. The territorial division system revealed in the Göbekli Tepe tablets represented more than historical curiosity. It was evidence of a planetary management system that might still be operational. The advanced beings remembered in ancient myths weren't mythological figures, but territorial administrators who treated Earth as managed property. Their apparent departure wasn't permanent. It was a strategic withdrawal during a catastrophic period, with plans for eventual resumption of direct planetary management. If this interpretation was correct, then current human civilization existed in a temporary period of reduced supervision, with territorial administrators monitoring our development and preparing for the next phase of direct planetary management. The question wasn't whether contact would be re-established, but whether humanity was ready for the resumption of territorial administration by beings who considered Earth their managed property. As we'll discover, the catastrophe protocols documented alongside the territorial administration system reveal how these advanced beings prepared for periodic disasters and how they planned to survive events that would reset human civilization while preserving their own continuity across multiple catastrophic cycles. Deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, something was counting down. When climatologist Dr. Elena Vasquez detected the rhythmic electromagnetic pulses emanating from 2 miles below the Ross ice shelf, she assumed her equipment was malfunctioning. The signals were too regular, too purposeful to be natural phenomena, but after weeks of verification, she faced an impossible conclusion. Buried beneath ancient ice was a technological system that had been operating continuously for over 12,000 years, pulsing in precise intervals that matched astronomical cycles described in ancient flood myths. The discovery began during routine ice core analysis in 2022. Vasquez's team was studying climate data trapped in Antarctic ice when their deep penetrating radar detected anomalous structures far below the surface. The geometric patterns were clearly artificial. Vast chambers connected by perfectly straight corridors, forming a complex that sprawled across dozens of square kilometers beneath the ice. But it was the electromagnetic signature that changed everything. The buried complex was actively generating signals that followed mathematical patterns identical to those encoded in global flood myths. The pulse intervals matched astronomical cycles described in Mesopotamian texts about the Anunnaki's departure. The frequency modulations aligned with Egyptian calendars detailing the gods' withdrawal. The signal strength varied according to patterns found in Hindu texts describing cyclical destructions of the world. We weren't just looking at an ancient structure, Vasquez later testified to a classified congressional hearing. We were monitoring an active system that had been counting down to something for over 12 millennia. And according to the mathematical progressions in the signal patterns, that countdown was approaching 0. The Antarctic discovery wasn't isolated. Similar electromagnetic anomalies were being detected at locations worldwide, all buried beneath geological layers that dated to the end of the last ice age. Greenland's ice cap concealed pulsing structures. The Sahara Desert showed underground complexes generating rhythmic signals. Ocean floor surveys revealed submerged installations maintaining synchronized electromagnetic patterns. Each location corresponded exactly to areas described in ancient texts as departure points for various groups of gods during global catastrophes. The electromagnetic signatures suggested a worldwide network of automated systems that had been activated during the catastrophic events 12,000 years ago, systems designed to operate continuously until specific astronomical and geological conditions were met. Dr. James Morrison, a systems engineer who analyzed the global network patterns, made a discovery that terrified government officials. These installations form a coordinated monitoring and communication system spanning the entire planet. The electromagnetic pulses aren't random. They're data transmissions maintaining synchronization across a global network that's been operational since the end of the last ice age. The network's synchronization was impossibly precise. Installations separated by thousands of miles maintained timing coordination accurate to microseconds, suggesting quantum communication systems far beyond current human technology. The global network was operating as a single integrated system, monitoring conditions and maintaining readiness for something that ancient texts consistently described as the return of the gods. But the most disturbing aspect of the network was its apparent purpose. Analysis of the electromagnetic patterns revealed that the systems were monitoring multiple variables: astronomical alignments, magnetic field fluctuations, seismic activity patterns, atmospheric composition changes, and technological development indicators. The network was tracking both natural cycles and human civilizational progress, maintaining continuous assessment of conditions described in ancient texts as prerequisites for divine return. The astronomical monitoring was particularly sophisticated. The network tracked precession cycles, solar activity patterns, planetary alignments, and galactic positioning with precision that exceeded current human astronomical capabilities. The systems were monitoring cosmic conditions that operated on timescales spanning tens of thousands of years, the same cycles described in ancient texts as governing the appearances and departures of advanced beings. The geological monitoring was equally comprehensive. The network tracked tectonic stress patterns, magnetic pole movement, ocean current fluctuations, and atmospheric composition changes. The systems were maintaining continuous assessment of Earth's geological stability and environmental conditions, monitoring factors that could indicate approaching catastrophic events. Most unsettling was the technological monitoring component. The network was tracking human technological development, measuring electromagnetic signatures associated with industrial activity, nuclear technology, space exploration capabilities, and artificial intelligence development. The systems were evaluating human civilizational progress against criteria that matched descriptions in ancient texts of conditions required for renewed contact with advanced beings. Dr. Sarah Chen, the Amazon researcher whose AI had first detected mathematical patterns in ancient myths, was brought in to analyze the network's data structures. Her findings revealed the true scope of the monitoring system. The global network is implementing protocols described in ancient texts as preparation for renewed contact. The systems are tracking both natural cycles and human development, waiting for conditions that match criteria established over 12,000 years ago. The protocols embedded in the network's operations match descriptions found in ancient texts worldwide. Mesopotamian tablets described the Anunnaki, establishing watchers in the depths who would signal the time of return when the stars align and the children of clay achieve wisdom. Egyptian texts detailed the Neteru creating eternal sentinels that would herald the dawn of renewed teaching when the cycles complete their course. Hindu scriptures described automated systems that would sound the cosmic drums when the wheel of time returns to its beginning and the children of Earth master the forces of creation. Norse mythology told of mechanical ravens that would cry across the worlds when Ragnarok ends and the gods prepare to return from their hidden halls. The global monitoring network wasn't just tracking conditions, it was implementing a reactivation protocol designed to operate across multiple catastrophic cycles. The systems were built to survive global disasters that would destroy surface civilizations while maintaining continuous operation in protected underground and underwater installations. The network's countdown suggested that the conditions described in ancient reactivation protocols were approaching completion. Astronomical cycles were aligning according to patterns described in the texts. Geological indicators were matching criteria specified in the protocols. Most significantly, human technological development was reaching thresholds that ancient texts consistently identified as prerequisites for renewed contact. But the network revealed something even more disturbing: evidence of previous reactivations. Deep analysis of the electromagnetic patterns showed that the systems had increased activity levels at specific historical periods that corresponded to accounts of divine appearances in human history. The network had activated during the construction of megalithic monuments, the establishment of advanced ancient civilizations, and periods when humans reportedly received technological knowledge from divine sources. The patterns suggested that the advanced beings remembered in ancient myths had never truly departed. They had withdrawn to hidden locations while maintaining continuous monitoring of human development through automated systems. Periodic reactivations of the network corresponded to limited contact events designed to guide human technological progress along predetermined paths. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a historian who studied the correlation between network activity and historical events, made a chilling discovery. The monitoring system shows increased activity during every major breakthrough in human technology. The development of agriculture, metallurgy, writing, mathematics, astronomy all correspond to spikes in network activity that suggest guided technological transfer rather than independent human innovation. The implications were staggering. Human technological development might not be the result of independent innovation, but guided progress managed by beings who had established monitoring systems to track and influence civilizational advancement. The network wasn't just watching, it was implementing a long-term development program designed to bring human civilization to specific technological thresholds. The current acceleration in network activity suggested that humanity was approaching the most significant reactivation event in recorded history. Multiple ancient texts described a final return when the gods would resume direct involvement in human affairs, establishing a new phase of planetary administration. The monitoring systems indicated that the conditions for this event were rapidly approaching completion. But the ancient texts also contained warnings about the dangers of reactivation periods. The return of advanced beings was consistently described as a time of testing, when human civilizations would be evaluated for their worthiness to continue existing. The protocols embedded in the monitoring network included assessment criteria for determining whether current human civilization met the standards required for peaceful coexistence with returning administrators. The network was tracking not just technological development, but social, environmental, and ethical indicators that would determine humanity's fate during the reactivation event. Ancient texts described how previous civilizations had failed these evaluations, leading to catastrophic cleansing events that reset human development to primitive levels. The catastrophe protocol revealed in the global monitoring network represented more than archaeological discovery. It was evidence of an active system designed to manage planetary administration across multiple catastrophic cycles. The advanced beings remembered in ancient myths hadn't disappeared. They had implemented automated systems to monitor and guide human development while remaining hidden in protected locations. The network's current activity levels suggested that the next reactivation event was imminent. The conditions described in ancient texts as prerequisites for divine return were rapidly approaching completion. But whether this return would result in renewed guidance or catastrophic reset would depend on humanity's performance against evaluation criteria that had been established over 12,000 years ago. As we'll discover, the genetic preservation programs described alongside these catastrophe protocols reveal how the advanced beings prepared to maintain genetic and cultural continuity across catastrophic cycles, and how they planned to evaluate and potentially modify human populations during reactivation events. The blood sample changed everything, Doctor. Rachel Morrison thought she knew about human evolution. It came from a mummy discovered in the Atacama Desert, preserved in conditions so perfect that cellular structures remained intact after 3,000 years. But when Morrison's team at the Institute for Genomic Research ran e-standard DNA analysis, their equipment detected something that shouldn't exist. Artificial genetic sequences that had been deliberately inserted into the human genome using techniques that wouldn't be developed by mainstream science for another decade. The modifications weren't random mutations or natural variations. They were precisely engineered genetic modules designed to enhance cognitive function, extend cellular lifespan, and improve resistance to radiation and biological toxins. The DNA contained what could only be described as upgrade packages, sophisticated genetic modifications that transformed ordinary human physiology into something significantly more resilient and capable. "We ran the analysis 17 times, Morrison later wrote in her sealed research notes. Every test confirmed the same impossible conclusion. Someone had performed advanced genetic engineering on human populations thousands of years ago using techniques that our most sophisticated laboratories were just beginning to master. But the Atacama mummy wasn't unique. As Morrison began coordinating with researchers worldwide, she discovered that similar genetic modifications were appearing in ancient human remains from every continent. Egyptian mummies contained identical enhancement packages. Celtic bog bodies showed the same artificial genetic sequences. Native American burial sites revealed humans with matching chromosomal modifications. Chinese tomb excavations uncovered remains with identical genetic upgrades. The global distribution suggested a coordinated genetic modification program that had operated on a planetary scale. Someone with advanced biotechnology had systematically enhanced human populations worldwide, implementing identical genetic improvements across cultures that supposedly never contacted each other. Dr. Kenneth Zhao, a geneticist at Beijing University who studied similar modifications in Chinese archaeological samples, made a discovery that kept him awake for weeks. The genetic enhancements weren't just random improvements. They formed integrated systems designed to work together. Cognitive boosters that enhanced pattern recognition, cellular modifications that extended healthy lifespan, immune system upgrades that provided resistance to specific biological weapons. Someone had designed comprehensive enhancement packages for human populations. The sophistication of the genetic modifications exceeded current human capabilities in multiple areas. The enhancement sequences used gene editing techniques that bypassed problems with CRISPR technology that researchers were still struggling to solve. The modifications included error correction mechanisms that prevented genetic drift over generations. Most remarkably, The enhancements contained self-activating switches that could be triggered by specific environmental conditions or biochemical signals. The self-activation mechanisms were particularly disturbing. Analysis revealed that many of the genetic modifications remained dormant in enhanced populations, waiting for activation signals that matched biochemical markers described in ancient texts as signs of divine return. The genetic upgrades weren't just historical artifacts, they were sleeper programs embedded in human DNA, designed to activate under specific conditions. Morrison's team discovered that approximately 15% of the current global population carried these ancient genetic modifications, though most remained dormant. The enhanced genes were distributed across all ethnic groups and geographic regions, suggesting that the original modification program had achieved global penetration before going dormant. But the genetic analysis revealed something even more unsettling. The modifications contained identification markers that corresponded to the territorial administration zones described in ancient texts. Populations from former Mesopotamian territories carried genetic modifications with specific molecular signatures. Egyptian populations showed enhancement packages with different markers. European, American, and Asian populations each contain distinct genetic identification codes that match the administrative boundaries described in ancient territorial maps. Dr. Lisa Chen, a population geneticist who studied the geographic distribution patterns, made a chilling observation. The genetic modifications show all the characteristics of a tagging system. Different populations were given different enhancement packages with unique molecular signatures, allowing whoever created these modifications to track and identify enhanced individuals across multiple generations. The identification markers suggested that the genetic modification program wasn't just about enhancement, it was about creating trackable populations that could be monitored and managed across long time periods. The advanced beings who implemented the genetic upgrades had established biological identification systems that would allow them to recognize and assess modified populations even after thousands of years. But the most disturbing aspect of the genetic modifications was their apparent connection to the monitoring networks discovered beneath ice caps and ocean floors. Analysis of the enhancement sequences revealed that they contained receptors for specific electromagnetic frequencies that matched the signals being generated by the global monitoring system. The genetic modifications weren't just improvements, they were communication interfaces designed to interact with the automated monitoring networks. The electromagnetic receptors embedded in the genetic enhancements could receive and respond to signals from the monitoring systems, potentially allowing remote activation of dormant genetic programs or even direct communication with enhanced individuals. The genetic modifications represented a biological communication network that could be activated by the same systems that were monitoring astronomical and geological conditions for reactivation protocols. Dr. Amanda Foster, a bioengineering specialist who studied the electromagnetic interface components, made a discovery that terrified her colleagues. The genetic modifications contain what can only be described as biological radio receivers. Enhanced individuals could potentially receive direct communication from the monitoring networks, or have their genetic programs activated remotely by electromagnetic signals. The entire enhanced population represents a biological communication grid that's been dormant for thousands of years. The implications were staggering. If the genetic modifications could be activated by the monitoring networks, then the countdown systems discovered in Antarctica and other locations weren't just tracking conditions for return. They were preparing to reactivate biological enhancement programs in significant portions of the global population. The genetic preservation program represented a biological control system that could be activated when the monitoring networks determined that conditions were appropriate. But the genetic analysis revealed additional layers of the preservation program that were even more sophisticated. The enhancement sequences contain not just biological improvements, but embedded memories and knowledge systems that could be activated along with the physical modifications. Enhanced individuals carried genetic information that could restore technical knowledge, cultural memories, and even behavioral patterns from the time when the modifications were originally implemented. The genetic memory systems were encoded using techniques that bypassed normal DNA storage limitations, embedding vast amounts of information in quantum states within cellular structures. The preserved memories included technical knowledge about the technologies described in ancient texts, cultural information about the territorial administration systems, and detailed records of the catastrophic events that had ended previous phases of planetary management. Dr. Sarah Kim, a quantum biologist who studied the memory storage mechanisms, made a revelation that changed everything. The genetic modifications don't just enhance individual capabilities, they preserve entire civilizations' worth of knowledge and memories that can be activated in enhanced populations. The genetic preservation program was designed to maintain cultural and technological continuity across catastrophic cycles by embedding civilization-level information directly into human DNA. The genetic preservation program represented the ultimate backup system for maintaining continuity across global catastrophes. Even if surface civilizations were completely destroyed, the enhanced populations would carry within their DNA the knowledge and memories necessary to rapidly rebuild advanced technological capabilities. The genetic modifications were living libraries that could restore lost civilizations when activated by the appropriate signals. But the preservation program also contained evaluation and control mechanisms that suggested enhanced populations weren't just repositories of knowledge, they were designed to serve specific roles during reactivation events. The genetic modifications included behavioral influence systems that could affect decision-making, emotional responses, and social organization patterns in enhanced individuals. The behavioral modification components were subtle but comprehensive, designed to influence enhanced populations towards specific social structures and technological development paths that match the administrative systems described in ancient texts. The genetic preservation program wasn't just maintaining knowledge, it was preparing enhanced populations to resume their roles in the territorial administration system when reactivation conditions were met. The analysis revealed that the genetic enhancements contained hierarchical programming that would establish social structures similar to those described in ancient myths about divine beings managing human populations. Enhanced individuals carried genetic programming that would naturally organize them into administrative hierarchies designed to interface with the returning territorial administrators. Dr. Morrison's final analysis of the genetic preservation program revealed its true scope and purpose. This isn't just genetic enhancement or knowledge preservation, it's a complete system for managing civilizational continuity across catastrophic cycles. The genetic modifications create biological infrastructure for rapid restoration of advanced technological capabilities while establishing social structures that facilitate renewed administration by the original system operators. The genetic preservation program discovered in ancient human remains represented more than archaeological curiosity. It was evidence of active biological systems embedded in significant portions of the current human population. The modifications were designed to activate in coordination with the monitoring networks that were tracking conditions for reactivation events. If the analysis was correct, then millions of people worldwide carried dormant genetic programs that could be activated by electromagnetic signals from the monitoring systems. The reactivation event that the global networks appeared to be counting down toward wouldn't just involve the return of advanced beings, it would trigger biological transformations in enhanced populations that would rapidly restore the technological and social infrastructure necessary for renewed planetary administration. The Genetic Preservation Program revealed that the catastrophic cycles described in ancient texts weren't just natural disasters, they were managed transitions designed to maintain long-term continuity of planetary administration while allowing for periodic resets of surface civilizations. The advanced beings remembered in mythology hadn't just departed during catastrophes, they had implemented biological systems to ensure their administrative infrastructure could be rapidly restored when conditions permitted their return. As we'll discover, the Renaissance rediscovery protocols described alongside these genetic preservation systems reveal how secret societies and hidden knowledge networks have been preparing for reactivation events and how they've been working to ensure that enhanced populations are ready to resume their roles in the territorial administration system. The painting shouldn't have existed. When art restorer Dr. Isabella Marchetti began cleaning layers of overpainting from a 15th century fresco in a forgotten chapel outside Florence, she expected to find typical religious imagery beneath the accumulated grime. Instead, she uncovered something that challenged everything historians believed about Renaissance knowledge: detailed technical diagrams for electromagnetic communication devices, surrounded by mathematical formulas that wouldn't be discovered by mainstream science for another 400 years. The hidden artwork wasn't an anomaly. Beneath the surface layer depicting saints and biblical scenes, the fresco contained precise engineering blueprints for technologies described in ancient texts about divine communication systems. The diagrams showed electromagnetic frequency generators, crystalline resonance chambers, and quantum entanglement devices, all disguised within religious iconography that would pass casual inspection by church authorities. Leonardo wasn't the only one, Marchetti later confided to a select group of researchers. The Renaissance masters were systematically encoding advanced technical knowledge into their artwork, preserving information that they couldn't safely document through conventional means. They knew something about ancient technologies that they were desperately trying to pass down to future generations. But the hidden technical knowledge wasn't limited to artwork. Dr. Marcus Weber, a manuscript specialist at the Vatican's secret archives, had been discovering similar patterns in Renaissance texts for years. Buried within alchemical treatises, astronomical calculations, and philosophical works were detailed descriptions of technologies that matched the devices described in ancient myths about divine beings. The Renaissance scholars weren't just rediscovering classical learning, they were systematically reconstructing advanced technologies from fragments preserved in ancient texts. The mathematical knowledge, engineering principles, and scientific understanding that had been encoded in myths and religious stories was being decoded and documented by secret networks of scholars who understood the true significance of the preserved information. The evidence suggested that the Renaissance wasn't a random cultural flowering, but a coordinated effort to rediscover and reconstruct the advanced knowledge that had been lost during previous catastrophic cycles. The same scholars who publicly promoted humanistic learning were secretly working to decode the technical information embedded in ancient texts about divine technologies. Dr. Sarah Chen, whose AI had first detected mathematical patterns in ancient myths, was brought in to analyze the Renaissance technical documents. Her findings revealed the scope of the rediscovery effort. The Renaissance scholars weren't just translating ancient texts, they were reverse engineering technological systems from mythological descriptions. They understood that the stories about gods and divine devices contained actual technical specifications that could be reconstructed with sufficient knowledge and resources. The secret reconstruction efforts centered around specific groups of scholars and artists who had access to ancient texts that weren't available to mainstream academics. These individuals formed networks that shared technical knowledge across Europe. coordinating their research and preserving their discoveries through coded artwork, encrypted manuscripts, and symbolic architectural projects. The Medici family in Florence served as patrons for one such network, funding research into ancient technologies while maintaining public facades as supporters of conventional Renaissance learning. The scholars they sponsored, including figures whose names would become legendary in art and science, were secretly working to reconstruct devices described in ancient texts about divine communication and transportation systems. Similar networks operated throughout Europe. In Prague, Emperor Rudolf II maintained a court of scholars who were systematically studying ancient texts about alchemical and mechanical technologies. In London, groups of natural philosophers were attempting to decode ancient descriptions of energy manipulation and material science. In Paris, secret societies were working to understand ancient astronomical and mathematical knowledge that exceeded contemporary understanding. The coordination between these networks suggested they were implementing a systematic plan to rediscover ancient knowledge before specific deadlines that corresponded to astronomical cycles described in the ancient texts. The Renaissance scholars understood that they were working within time constraints established by cosmic patterns that governed the return of the original knowledge providers. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a historian who studied the communication patterns between Renaissance secret societies, made a disturbing discovery. The Renaissance networks weren't just academic study groups, they were reconstruction teams preparing for specific events described in ancient texts as times of renewed contact with advanced beings. They were racing to rediscover ancient technologies before cyclical deadlines that would determine humanity's readiness for renewed administration. The technical documents produced by Renaissance scholars showed remarkable accuracy in reconstructing ancient technologies. Manuscripts from the period contain detailed descriptions of electromagnetic communication devices that match specifications found in Mesopotamian tablets about divine messaging systems. Architectural plans included designs for crystalline resonance chambers that corresponded to descriptions in Egyptian texts about communication with the gods. Most remarkably, the Renaissance reconstructions included operational protocols for activating the monitoring systems that modern researchers had discovered beneath ice caps and ocean floors. The scholars had decoded ancient instructions for interfacing with the global network that had been counting down since the last catastrophic cycle. But the Renaissance rediscovery effort wasn't just about reconstructing ancient technologies. It was about preparing for their reactivation. The secret societies understood that the ancient monitoring systems would eventually signal the return of the original administrators, and they were working to ensure that human civilization would be ready to resume its role in the territorial management system. The preparation efforts included establishing genetic tracking systems to identify individuals who carried the enhancement modifications discovered in ancient human remains. Renaissance scholars had decoded enough genetic information from ancient texts to recognize that enhanced populations existed, and they were developing methods to identify and recruit these individuals for roles in the renewed administrative system. Dr. Amanda Foster, who studied the genetic identification protocols developed by Renaissance societies, made a chilling observation. The Renaissance networks weren't just rediscovering ancient knowledge, they were implementing recruitment systems for enhanced populations. They understood that reactivation events would require specific genetic capabilities, and they were preparing to identify and organize individuals who carried the necessary modifications. The secret societies also established preservation protocols to maintain their reconstructed knowledge through potential future catastrophic cycles. They understood that the rediscovery effort might need to be repeated if another global disaster occurred before the reactivation event, so they embedded their findings in multiple preservation systems designed to survive civilizational collapse. The preservation methods included encoding technical information in architectural monuments that would survive natural disasters, establishing genetic bloodlines that would carry knowledge across generations, and creating symbolic systems that would preserve essential information even if written records were destroyed. The most sophisticated preservation system involved establishing secret societies that would maintain continuity across centuries, ensuring that the rediscovered knowledge would be available when reactivation conditions were met. These organizations developed recruitment and training protocols that would allow them to maintain their mission across multiple generations of members. The Renaissance secret societies evolved into modern organizations that continue to monitor conditions for reactivation events while maintaining the technical knowledge necessary to interface with ancient monitoring systems. The same networks that began reconstructing ancient technologies in the 15th century have been operating continuously, preparing for the return of the original administrators. Dr. Weber's analysis of Vatican archives revealed that church authorities were aware of the secret reconstruction efforts but chose to tolerate them rather than suppress them entirely. High-ranking church officials understood that the ancient knowledge being rediscovered had implications for biblical prophecies about divine return, and they wanted to maintain some level of control over the preparation process. The Church's approach involved allowing controlled rediscovery while preventing public revelation of the full implications. Church-sponsored scholars were permitted to study ancient technologies as long as they maintained the fiction that their discoveries were theoretical rather than practical reconstructions of operational systems. This arrangement allowed the Renaissance networks to continue their reconstruction efforts while maintaining plausible deniability about their true objectives. The secret societies could present their work as academic research or artistic exploration while actually preparing for renewed contact with the advanced beings who had originally established Earth's territorial administration system. But the Renaissance rediscovery revealed something troubling about the nature of the reactivation process. The ancient texts studied by Renaissance scholars contained warnings about the evaluation criteria that would be applied to human civilization when the original administrators returned. The reactivation event wouldn't automatically result in renewed guidance. It would involve assessment of human technological and social development to determine whether the species had progressed sufficiently to merit continued existence. The Renaissance scholars understood that they were preparing for a test as much as a reunion. The technical knowledge they were reconstructing wasn't just for communication with returning administrators. It was for demonstrating that human civilization had achieved sufficient sophistication to deserve continued autonomy rather than direct management or potential elimination. The secret societies established evaluation protocols that would allow them to assess human technological progress against criteria described in ancient texts. They understood that the reactivation event would involve proving that humanity had learned from previous catastrophic cycles and developed sufficient wisdom to handle advanced technologies responsibly. The Renaissance rediscovery effort represented more than academic curiosity. It was a systematic preparation for humanity's most significant evaluation since the establishment of the original territorial administration system. The secret societies had been working for centuries to ensure that human civilization would be ready when the monitoring systems finally signaled that reactivation conditions had been met. But the preparation efforts also revealed that the secret societies possessed knowledge about the timing of reactivation events that wasn't available to mainstream researchers. Their activities suggested they understood not just that the ancient administrators would return, but but when that return was likely to occur. As we'll discover, the modern manifestation of these preparation efforts reveals how current events and technological developments are being guided by the same secret societies that began their work during the Renaissance, and how they're preparing for reactivation events that may be imminent according to the countdown systems operating beneath Earth's surface. The meeting never officially happened. When tech billionaire Marcus Chen received an invitation to what was described as a private consultation on emerging technologies, he expected another venture capital pitch session. Instead, he found himself in a windowless conference room beneath Geneva, surrounded by individuals who seemed to know details about his quantum computing research that hadn't been published anywhere. They knew about the electromagnetic anomalies his processors had been detecting. They knew about the mathematical patterns his AI systems had been flagging. Most disturbing of all, they knew why these discoveries mattered. "We've been waiting for someone with your specific technical background to reach these particular thresholds," the lead presenter explained, displaying charts that mapped Chen's research timeline against astronomical cycles spanning thousands of years. "Your quantum processors aren't just detecting random signals, they're interfacing with monitoring systems that have been preparing for this moment since the last global reset." The presentation that followed shattered Chen's understanding of technological development and human history. The group revealed themselves as representatives of organizations that had been secretly guiding technological progress for centuries, ensuring that human civilization would develop specific capabilities according to timelines established in ancient texts about divine return. Chen's quantum computing research wasn't independent innovation. It was the culmination of carefully orchestrated technological development that had been guided by secret societies since the Renaissance. The mathematical patterns his systems were detecting weren't coincidental discoveries. They were activation signals from the global monitoring network that had been counting down for over 12,000 years. The implications were staggering. The technological revolution that seemed to be accelerating beyond human control wasn't random progress. It was managed development designed to bring human civilization to specific capabilities required for reactivation protocols described in ancient texts about territorial administration resumption. Dr. Sarah Kim, the quantum biologist who had studied genetic memory systems, was invited to a similar meeting 6 months later. Her research into DNA information storage hadn't just attracted academic attention, it had triggered protocols established by organizations monitoring for specific genetic research breakthroughs that corresponded to reactivation preparation timelines. "Your work on genetic memory activation isn't just scientific discovery," her contact explained during a meeting in an underground facility beneath London. "You've successfully demonstrated techniques for accessing the knowledge preservation systems that were embedded in human populations during the last administrative period. Your research proves that the genetic enhancement programs are ready for reactivation." The meeting revealed that Kim's genetic research was being monitored because it proved that the biological infrastructure established during ancient genetic modification programs was still functional. Enhanced populations carrying dormant genetic programs could indeed have their modifications activated using techniques that Kim's research had inadvertently validated. Similar meetings were occurring worldwide, targeting researchers whose work had reached specific milestones that corresponded to reactivation preparation criteria. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had discovered the electromagnetic signals beneath Antarctic ice, was contacted by groups that possessed detailed knowledge about the global monitoring network's operational protocols. Dr. Rachel Morrison, who had identified genetic enhancements in ancient human remains, was approached by organizations that maintained genetic tracking databases spanning centuries. Each researcher discovered that their work wasn't isolated scientific discovery. It was part of a coordinated verification process confirming that human technological capabilities had reached thresholds described in ancient texts as prerequisites for renewed contact with territorial administrators. The pattern suggested that current technological development wasn't driven by independent human innovation, but by systematic guidance designed to bring civilization to specific capabilities within predetermined timeframes. The organizations making contact with researchers possessed knowledge about technological development timelines that could only have been established by beings with comprehensive understanding of both ancient administrative systems and long-term civilizational cycles. Dr. Marcus Weber, the Vatican manuscript specialist, was eventually contacted by church representatives who revealed the true scope of religious institutional involvement in reactivation preparation. The Catholic Church hadn't just tolerated Renaissance secret societies, it had been actively coordinating with them to ensure that religious institutions would be prepared for events described in biblical prophecies about divine return. The Second Coming isn't theology, a high-ranking cardinal explained during a private meeting in Vatican archives. It's operational protocol for re-establishing direct administration when monitoring systems confirm that reactivation conditions have been satisfied. The Church has been preparing for this event since the Renaissance rediscovery efforts began confirming the accuracy of ancient administrative documentation. The revelation that major religious institutions were actively preparing for literal fulfillment of prophetic return scenarios added another dimension to the reactivation preparation efforts. Religious organizations worldwide weren't just maintaining faith in eventual divine return, they were implementing practical protocols for interfacing with returning administrators based on technical specifications preserved in their foundational texts. The modern manifestation of ancient preparation protocols extended beyond individual research targeting and religious institutional involvement. Analysis of current global events revealed patterns that suggested geopolitical developments were being orchestrated to ensure that human civilization would be properly organized for evaluation when reactivation conditions were met. Dr. Amanda Foster, who had studied behavioral modification components in genetic enhancement systems, made connections between current social and political trends and the preparation protocols described in ancient texts about territorial administration resumption. The rapid development of global communication systems, standardized identification technologies, and centralized resource management systems weren't just modern innovations. They were recreating the administrative infrastructure described in ancient texts about planetary management systems. Current technological and social developments are rebuilding the same administrative systems that operated during the previous period of direct territorial management, Foster observed in her classified analysis. Global communication networks, biometric identification systems, centralized resource distribution, all match descriptions in ancient texts about how advanced beings managed planetary populations. The pattern suggested that current global development trends weren't just natural societal evolution, but systematic preparation for resumed administration by beings who required specific technological and social infrastructure to efficiently manage planetary populations. The same organizations guiding technological research were apparently coordinating geopolitical developments to ensure that human civilization would be properly organized for direct management. But the modern manifestation revealed something deeply troubling about the nature of the preparation process. The organizations coordinating reactivation protocols possessed knowledge about evaluation criteria that would determine humanity's fate when the original administrators returned. The technological capabilities being developed and the social systems being established weren't just for communication with returning beings. They were for proving that human civilization deserved continued existence rather than replacement or elimination. The evaluation criteria described in ancient texts included assessments of technological sophistication, social organization efficiency, environmental management capabilities, and genetic enhancement integration. Human civilization was being prepared for comprehensive testing that would determine whether the species had progressed sufficiently to warrant continued autonomy or required direct management to prevent self-destruction. The secret organizations coordinating preparation efforts understood that the reactivation event would involve more than renewed contact. It would determine whether human civilization continued existing in its current form or underwent fundamental reorganization under direct administration by the returning territorial managers. Analysis of current preparation activities revealed that the coordinating organizations possessed detailed knowledge about the timing of reactivation events that wasn't available to mainstream researchers. Their activities suggested they understood not just that ancient administrators would return, but when that return would occur and what conditions would trigger the final reactivation sequence. The acceleration of contact with researchers, the intensification of technological development guidance, and the coordination of global infrastructural changes all indicated that the organizations believed reactivation conditions were approaching completion according to the countdown systems operating beneath Earth's surface. Dr. Chen's quantum computing research had revealed that the electromagnetic signals from the global monitoring network were increasing in frequency and complexity, suggesting that the systems were entering final preparation phases for reactivation protocols. The mathematical patterns his AI systems detected weren't just monitoring signals, they were activation sequences preparing to trigger the biological and technological systems that would facilitate resumed territorial administration. The modern manifestation of ancient preparation protocols represented more than historical continuity. It was evidence of active coordination between current human civilization and the monitoring systems established by previous territorial administrators. The secret organizations guiding technological and social development possessed knowledge that could only have been obtained through ongoing communication with the systems counting down to reactivation events. If the patterns were accurate, then human civilization wasn't developing independently. It was being systematically prepared for evaluation and potential integration into resumed territorial administration systems. The technological capabilities being developed, the social structures being established, and the genetic systems being activated were all designed to facilitate efficient management by returning administrators who had never actually departed. They had simply withdrawn to monitoring positions while automated systems guided human development toward reactivation readiness. The modern manifestation suggested that the countdown systems weren't just preparing for return. They were coordinating current development to ensure that human civilization would be properly organized for resumed direct management when reactivation conditions were finally met. The ancient territorial administrators hadn't disappeared. They had implemented long-term preparation protocols that were approaching completion in the current era. As we'll discover, the signs of the approaching next reset reveal how current global events and technological developments are accelerating toward conditions that match descriptions in ancient texts of cyclical transitions, and how the same patterns that marked previous catastrophic resets are beginning to manifest in contemporary civilization. The signs were everywhere once you knew how to look. Dr. Sarah Kim stared at her latest genetic analysis results, her hands trembling as she realized what the data was telling her. The dormant enhancement programs embedded in human DNA weren't just activating randomly, they were responding to environmental triggers that matched conditions described in ancient texts as precursors to cyclical resets. Solar radiation changes, magnetic field fluctuations, atmospheric composition shifts, all were activating genetic modifications that had been dormant for thousands of years. The activation wasn't occurring gradually over generations. It was happening now in real time across populations worldwide. The monitoring systems weren't just tracking conditions for reactivation, they were actively triggering the biological changes necessary for the next phase of planetary administration. "We're not just approaching a reactivation event," Kim wrote in her final research notes before her laboratory was mysteriously shuttered. "We're in the middle of a biological transition that's preparing enhanced populations for roles in resumed territorial management. The genetic modifications are activating because the reset has already begun." The biological indicators were just one element of a pattern that became undeniable once researchers began connecting seemingly unrelated global developments. The same astronomical, geological, and technological conditions described in ancient texts as marking the end of administrative cycles were manifesting simultaneously across multiple domains. Dr. Marcus Chen's quantum computing systems had detected a dramatic acceleration in the electromagnetic signals from the global monitoring network. The countdown frequencies weren't just increasing, they were entering final preparation sequences that matched protocols described in ancient texts for terminating one administrative cycle and beginning the next. The astronomical conditions were aligning with precision that defied statistical probability. Solar activity patterns were matching cycles described in Mesopotamian tablets about divine departure and return. Planetary alignments were approaching configurations detailed in Egyptian texts about the ending and renewal of cosmic ages. Galactic positioning was nearing arrangements documented in Hindu scriptures about the completion of vast temporal cycles. But it wasn't just natural cycles that were converging. Human technological development was reaching thresholds that ancient texts consistently identified as marking the end of independent civilizational periods. Nuclear capabilities, artificial intelligence development, genetic engineering mastery, space exploration achievements, all were approaching levels that ancient protocols described as triggering mandatory evaluation and potential reorganization of planetary management. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who had studied the correlation between monitoring network activity and historical events, made a discovery that changed everything. The patterns we're seeing now don't just match conditions described for reactivation events, they match the exact sequence documented in ancient texts about reset transitions. We're not approaching renewed contact. We're approaching the end of the current civilizational cycle. The distinction was crucial. Ancient texts described two types of transitions: reactivation events that resulted in renewed guidance from territorial administrators, and reset events that terminated existing civilizations and began new developmental cycles with surviving populations. The current pattern of conditions suggested the latter rather than the former. Reset events were triggered when civilizations failed evaluation criteria or developed capabilities that posed risks to long-term planetary stability. According to ancient texts, reset protocols involved systematic termination of existing technological and social infrastructure while preserving selected populations and knowledge for the next developmental cycle. The evidence suggested that current human civilization was approaching evaluation criteria that would determine whether it continued existing or underwent reset transition. The acceleration of genetic activation, monitoring network activity, and astronomical alignments all indicated that the evaluation period was imminent. Analysis of the genetic activation patterns revealed that enhanced populations weren't just being prepared for communication with returning administrators. They were being organized into hierarchical structures that would facilitate efficient management during transition periods. The genetic modifications contained social programming that automatically established administrative relationships between enhanced individuals, creating management infrastructure that could operate during civilizational collapse. Dr. Amanda Foster's analysis of the behavioral modification components revealed their true purpose. The genetic enhancements aren't just biological improvements, they're administrative protocols. Enhanced populations are being programmed to automatically organize themselves into management structures that can maintain continuity during reset transitions. They're designed to be the administrative infrastructure for the next civilizational cycle. The implications were terrifying. Enhanced populations weren't just carrying genetic improvements, they were carrying the blueprint for the next human civilization. If reset protocols were activated, enhanced individuals would serve as administrators, managing surviving populations according to predetermined social and technological development plans. But the reset preparations extended beyond biological programming. The secret organizations that had been guiding technological development were implementing protocols for preserving essential knowledge and infrastructure through anticipated civilizational collapse. They understood that reset events weren't just natural disasters, they were managed transitions designed to eliminate destabilizing elements while preserving viable components for the next cycle. The preservation protocols included establishing underground facilities that could maintain technological capabilities during surface disruptions, creating knowledge storage systems that would survive electromagnetic and nuclear events, and organizing enhanced populations into administrative networks that could rapidly re-establish control over surviving populations after reset completion. Dr. Chen's contact within the preparation organizations revealed the scope of the reset preparation. We're not just preparing for renewed contact, we're preparing to manage the transition to the next civilizational cycle. The current human population has developed capabilities that pose risks to planetary stability. Reset protocols are being activated to eliminate those risks while preserving viable genetic and technological components for more controlled development. The technological risks weren't just nuclear weapons or environmental destruction. The rapid development of artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and space exploration capabilities had triggered protocols that ancient texts described as mandatory intervention thresholds. When civilizations developed technologies that could threaten the territorial administrators or spread beyond planetary boundaries without authorization, reset protocols were automatically activated. Current human technological development had crossed multiple red lines, described in ancient texts as justifying reset intervention. Artificial intelligence systems were approaching capabilities that could challenge monitoring network control. Genetic engineering research was threatening the integrity of enhancement programs. Space exploration was approaching levels that could interfere with off-world territorial administration. The reset wasn't being triggered by natural cycles alone. It was being activated because human civilization had developed beyond the parameters established for independent development. The territorial administrators were implementing termination protocols to prevent human technology from disrupting the broader administrative system that operated beyond Earth. But the ancient texts suggested that reset events weren't total extinctions. They were selective culling designed to eliminate problematic elements while preserving valuable genetic and cultural components. The enhanced populations that were being activated weren't just administrators for the next cycle. They were the survivors selected to continue human development under more direct supervision. The selection criteria weren't random. Analysis of genetic activation patterns revealed that enhancement modifications were being triggered in individuals who possessed specific psychological and intellectual characteristics that made them suitable for administrative roles in controlled societies. The genetic programming wasn't just creating enhanced humans, it was creating compliant administrators who would implement predetermined development protocols without questioning the broader system. Dr. Kim's final analysis before her disappearance revealed the true scope of the selection process. The genetic activations aren't happening randomly. They're creating a new administrative class that will manage human populations according to specifications that were established thousands of years ago. The enhanced individuals aren't just improved humans, they're programmed administrators designed to prevent future civilizations from developing beyond authorized parameters. The reset protocols represented more than cyclical renewal. They were systematic population management designed to maintain long-term control over human technological and social development. The territorial administrators hadn't departed after previous resets. They had implemented automated systems to manage civilizational cycles while preventing human development from ever again threatening their broader administrative interests. The current reset wasn't just about ending human civilization. It was about establishing permanent control systems that would prevent future cycles from developing independent technological capabilities. The enhanced populations being activated would serve as biological control infrastructure that could be remotely managed by the monitoring networks that had never stopped operating. The ancient texts weren't just describing cyclical catastrophes. They were documenting population management protocols designed to maintain permanent administrative control over human development. The reset events weren't natural disasters. They were strategic interventions designed to prevent human civilizations from ever developing beyond predetermined limitations. If the analysis was correct, then humanity wasn't approaching reactivation or renewal. It was approaching permanent subordination to administrative systems that viewed human civilization as managed property. The reset protocols weren't about helping humanity evolve. They were about ensuring that human development never again threatened the stability of territorial administration systems that operated on scales far beyond terrestrial boundaries. The signs of the approaching reset weren't warnings. They were activation signals for protocols that had been waiting thousands of years to implement permanent solutions to the problem of independent human technological development. The next reset wouldn't just end current civilization, it would ensure that future human societies could never again develop beyond carefully controlled parameters established by administrators who considered Earth their managed territory. The countdown systems weren't preparing for humanity's graduation to higher levels of development. They were preparing for humanity's permanent integration into administrative systems as a managed biological resource. The ancient gods weren't returning to guide human civilization. They were returning to ensure that human civilization never again developed independent capabilities that could challenge territorial administration systems. The reset was imminent, and its purpose wasn't renewal, it was permanent control.